Most people think the biggest financial mistake is losing money. But the truth is, sometimes the real mistake is never letting your money live at all. My name is Albert. I'm 80 years old now, and for most of my life, I believed I was doing everything right with money. I worked hard, I avoided debt, and I saved every dollar I could. I thought that if I just protected my money, kept it safe, and never took risks.
Most people think the biggest financial mistake is losing money, but the truth is, sometimes the real mistake is never letting your money live at all. My name is Albert. I'm 80 years old now, and for most of my life I believed I was doing everything right with money. I worked hard, I avoided debt, and I saved every dollar I could. I thought that if I just protected my money, kept it safe, and never took risks, I would be secure. But it took me more than 60 years to realize something I wish someone had told me when I was young. Saving money and growing money are not the same thing. I grew up in a small house where money was always tight. My father worked long hours, and my mother stretched every dollar like it was the last one we would ever see. In our home, the lesson was simple. Spend as little as possible, save everything you can. There were no conversations about investing. No talk about businesses or stocks or how money could multiply over time. The only rule was safety. If you had money, you protected it. So when I got my first real job in my early 20s, that's exactly what I did. I opened a savings account and began putting money away every single month. Sometimes it was a lot, sometimes it was only a little, but I was disciplined about it. I felt proud every time I looked at that balance growing slowly, dollar by dollar. While my friends were buying new cars and taking expensive trips, I stayed careful. I drove used cars. I skipped luxuries. I packed lunches instead of eating out. At the time, it felt responsible. It felt wise. Years passed. Then decades. I got married. My wife and I raised 2 children. We worked, we saved, and we stayed cautious with money. Every time I had extra income, it went straight into savings. I believed that patience and discipline were all a person needed. And in many ways, those things are good qualities. But what I didn't understand back then was something very important. Money sitting still doesn't grow the way time does. I remember one afternoon when I was in my late 40s. A coworker of mine had been talking about investments. He mentioned buying shares in a company that was expanding. He explained how he put money into different places so it could grow over time. I listened politely, but in my mind I thought he was being reckless. To me, investing sounded like gambling, risky, uncertain, dangerous. I remember telling him I'd rather keep my money safe. He smiled and said something I didn't fully understand at the time. He said, "Albert, money is meant to work. If it's sitting still, it's not really doing its job." I nodded, but I didn't change a thing. Years went by and I kept saving. Every raise I got went into that same savings account. Every bonus was tucked away. I felt comfort knowing my money was safe, untouched, protected. But there was something happening quietly in the background that I wasn't paying attention to: inflation. Prices slowly rose year after year. What a dollar could buy in my 30s was not the same as what it could buy in my 50s. My money was safe, but it was slowly losing strength. Meanwhile, I watched people around me who had taken small risks over time. They invested in businesses, in property, in the stock market. Not all of them succeeded immediately, but many of them allowed time to do something powerful. Time multiplied their money. When I reached my 60s and began thinking seriously about retirement, I finally started paying closer attention to those differences. Some of the people I had worked with for decades had accounts that had grown far beyond what they had originally invested. Not because they saved more than me, but because they allowed their money to grow. I still remember sitting at the kitchen table one evening, looking at my savings, and comparing it to what it might have been if even a portion of it had been invested decades earlier. The numbers were difficult to ignore. The difference was enormous, and that's when the realization finally settled in. For 40 years, I had treated money like something fragile that needed protection. But money is not like a piece of glass you hide in a cabinet. Money is more like a seed. If you lock a seed away to keep it safe, it will never become anything more than what it already is. But if you plant it, if you give it time, it can grow into something far larger than you ever imagined. I had spent my life collecting seeds, but I never planted the field. Now I want to be clear about something. Saving money is important. It creates discipline, stability, and security. Without savings, life becomes fragile and unpredictable. But saving alone is only the first step. It's the foundation. The part I didn't understand when I was young is that money needs direction. It needs purpose. It needs a place where it can grow while time quietly does the work. When you are 20, time is your greatest advantage. When you are 30, time is still generous. Even at 40 or 50, time can still do remarkable things. But by the time you reach 80, you begin to see how powerful those earlier decades really were. If I could sit across from my younger self today, I wouldn't tell him to stop saving. I would simply tell him this: learn how money grows, learn how time multiplies small decisions, and don't spend your entire life protecting something that was meant to work for you. Because the greatest financial mistake I made wasn't losing money. It was never giving my money the chance to grow into what it could have become. So if you're listening to an old man who has already walked most of his road, let me leave you with this thought. Protect your money, yes, but don't forget to plant it.